Welcome, everyone, and I'd like to tell you what a pleasure it is to be with you today to talk about management development in today's economy. My name is Susan Cullen, and I'm president of Quantum Learning Solutions, and really look forward to sharing some ideas with you today that I think you'll find very helpful in this next hour that we have together. I'd like to give you a little bit of background about our organization before we get started. For those of you that may not be as familiar with us, Quantum Learning Solutions was founded in 1989, and our focus is really as management development and productivity specialists. But we were very early adopters of blended learning. We started incorporating live virtual learning about 12 years ago, and we've also created a library of self-paced e-learning programs and have incorporated those into our traditional classroom-based programs to really help make learning more long-lasting and more effective for the participants. Our blended learning approach frequently incorporates some type of either a self-assessment instrument or a multi-rater assessment, and then we provide both traditional face-to-face classroom training as well as live virtual learning. And in all of our programs, we incorporate action plan and opportunities for people to practice between class sessions so they really know how to implement the learning on the job. But we're probably most well known for the heavy emphasis we place on reinforcement, and I'll be sharing some of those ways that you can do that as well today. Basically, we just don't believe that learning equals attending. We believe that learning equals real change, and that's our focus, and you'll see that incorporated in what we talk about today. So with that said, the objectives that we have for today's webinar are to give you an opportunity to really look at what are the skills that managers need today to be effective. What's happening in the world today that makes it even more of a unique time for the managers and leaders in your organization, and what do they really need to do? And also, with that said, when we look at what's happening in our economy, how can you maximize learning even when your budget has been minimized? You know, we're at a very unique time in history. The workplace has never been more global, more connected, and more mobile. And at the same time, what we know is that management, the role of manager and leader, has never been more important to help your organization stay competitive and prosper. So our goal today is to address the current challenges that you face and provide some solutions that you can use now. Our agenda is going to be to start to focus on what are really some of the challenges that you're facing, what's happening out there, and the significance of the manager's role. We'll share some research with you about why they are so key today, and what are the skills that they need now, the most essential skills that they're needed to lead staff through today's challenges at the highest level of productivity. We'll talk about live virtual learning and how it can help you, and give you some case study examples so you can really see the best practices for live virtual learning that will help you maximize the learning effectiveness. And at the end, share with you some resources that you can use immediately to help. So we want to make this very interactive, and there are several ways that we will be able to do that. One way is with hand raising, and I'd like to just periodically, I may ask you to raise your hand if you can relate to a comment. If you look on the attendee list next to your name, there's a little hand, and you can raise your hand. If you want to go ahead and raise it now, thanks, Jeremy, I saw that. The rest of you want to just go ahead and raise your hand so I know that you've seen it. If you look at the attendee list next to where you see your name, you'll see just a picture of a little hand, and you can raise that. And then if you hit it again, you can lower it, and we'll be using that periodically. We're also going to be asking you quite a few polling questions, so you'll have the opportunity to share your thoughts with us that way. And last but not least, I really want to encourage you to feel free to ask questions. There's a place for you on your control panel where you can ask those questions. Kathy Doris from our office is standing by to answer those as they come, so she is monitoring those and can get back to you right away. Also, we'll be answering questions at the end, and so I've scheduled some time for us to do that. And just want you to know, if we don't have time to get to all of the questions, we will respond to any unanswered question by email within either today or tomorrow. So all the questions will be answered. And one very common question that I know always comes up is that people ask if there will be a recording of this and if that will be available to them. And yes, there will be a recording. Everyone who's registered will get a copy of it tomorrow, so you will have access to that. So with that said then, let's begin to start to talk about what's really happening in today's economy. And when we look at what's happening now, we see that a lot of organizations are facing budget cuts. And if the budget hasn't been cut, it's definitely highly scrutinized. And we begin to see also that when it comes to learning, we especially see a reduction in travel costs. A lot of organizations are doing that. They just don't want to spend their learning dollar on travel. And there are, in many cases, modest, if any, salary increases. So I'm curious to see from your experience, what are you facing and experiencing as it relates to this? I'm going to send over a poll and ask you what your experience has been, and if you are finding any of these. And please feel free to select any of these that you are facing now. So just go ahead and select which one. You can select more than one. But are you facing budget cuts, spending highly scrutinized, a reduction in travel, or modest, if any, salary increases? So go ahead and select how many of those you find that you're facing right now. And I'll give you just another couple seconds to continue to vote if you haven't voted yet. Okay. Let's take a look at that, and I'll share with you the responses. And so one of the things we can see is definitely we've got quite a few of you, 82%, who are saying budget cuts and also that spending is highly scrutinized. 73% finding a reduction in travel costs, and 55% modest, if any, salary increases. So it's good to see that only a little more than half of you are facing modest salary increases, if any. But again, we begin to see that a lot of those experiences that many of you are talking about that we see in the world are impacting our experience in organizations. And so what happens is we have these following challenges because of it. If spending is highly scrutinized, as 82% of you say it is, then we have to do more with fewer resources. And what also happens is if you've had any layoffs, then those people that are remaining have to be even more productive because they've got to pick up the slack of those people that are left and absorb their responsibilities. There's also a need for staff to embrace change. It changes in policies, changes in responsibilities in order to be more innovative and more flexible today. And last but not least, with all of that going on, you've still got to keep morale up and people engaged in spite of it all. So I'm curious to see at this point, and this gives you a chance to kind of benchmark yourself against other people in the class and what your organization may be facing. Let's see from your own experience, what challenges related to that is your organization facing now? And please share your thoughts with us. You can select more than one of these, so select as many of these that you're finding. Are you needing to do more with fewer resources, so basically more with less? Really looking for ways to increase productivity, especially with those people that are maybe left to pick up the slack or even just the need to do more. Need to get people to embrace change, and need to keep morale up in the midst of all of that going on. So go ahead and send your thoughts over. All right, I'm going to now share with you the responses. And it looks like what we see here is that 73% of you are saying they need to do more with less, 60% need to increase productivity, 80% need to help staff embrace change, but we see 100% of you are needing to embrace employee morale and engagement. So again, what we begin to recognize is that we've got some common challenges out there. The economy is placing a lot of these challenges in the forefront, but here's probably what we begin to see, the big picture. And the challenge that you may be facing when it's all said and done is how do you keep productivity on the upswing even when the economy hits into a downturn? And although there are some signs that it may be getting better, it's still probably your key challenge. How do you do that? And how do you do that effectively? So with that said, why is the role of manager so important in this focus? And why do we want to focus here? Because there's a definite link to what we just talked about. And Gallup did a very extensive study with over 100 employees in a variety of industries. You may have heard about it, but we see it's especially relevant as it's related to this discussion because they went back to identify what were the beliefs that employees thought in the most productive organizations that separated them from everybody else. What were those beliefs that basically led to more organizational productivity and profitability, but also helped them retain their best people and, last but not least, retain their customers? What did those employees find? What did they think from the employee's perspective? And here's what they found. And there were 12 beliefs. I'm going to share with you the first 6, and then we'll look at the second 6. And as we take a look at these, I'd like to ask you to think about this question because I'll ask you your thoughts about it in just a minute. And the question is, how many of these items do you think are directly influenced, if not controlled, at least influenced by the person's immediate manager? Number 1, I know what's expected of me. I have the materials and equipment I need to do my job right. I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day. In the last 7 days, I've received praise for good work. My supervisor seems to care about me as a person, and there's someone at work who encourages my development. So just ask yourself as you look at these, how many of these do you think are influenced by the direct manager? If not controlled, definitely influenced. Let's look at the next 6 now. In the last 6 months, someone has talked to me about my progress. At work, my opinions seem to count. The purpose of my company makes me feel my job is important. My associates are committed to doing quality work. I have a best friend at work, and this last year I've had opportunities to learn and grow. So what we'd like to ask you here then is to share your thoughts with us about this next one, and how many of these do you think were influenced by the manager? So I just sent over another polling question. Please select one of these answers. Do you think it was all of them were directly influenced, if not controlled, most of them, some of them, or none of them? And if everybody would make one selection, we'll take a look and see what you thought. And basically, you know, this is what you said, that it looks like 69% of you are saying most of them and 31% saying all of them. You know, sometimes people aren't real sure about the question, I have a best friend at work, or maybe some of the other things. But definitely what we see is most, if not all of these, are influenced by the manager. If they're not directly controlled, the manager plays a key role. So in summary, after that was done, and these are the things that brought the most productivity and profitability to companies, Gallup said this, that what becomes clear from this investigation is that while we tend to celebrate great companies, in reality there are only great managers. And it's on the front line that the hard work of building a stronger workplace gets done. So in other words, it's the one-on-one relationship. In other words, here's what Gallup is saying from this particular statement. And it's the one-on-one relationship that the manager or supervisor has with each employee. And this one-on-one relationship impacts how they feel about the job, how engaged they are, how willing they are to go the extra mile, be creative, find new solutions. And a lot of times we see that managers just underestimate how important their role is. But it's fundamentally critical. It's that one-on-one relationship they have with each manager and supervisor that helps companies be more profitable and more productive. Well, recognizing how important that role is and that people do that effectively, what companies are also finding now is that there's just a gap in the leadership pipeline. That as the boomers start to retire and we have more people coming into the workplace, we don't seem to have enough future managers ready to step up to the plate. There are just not enough of them ready. In fact, what's interesting is that Burson and Associates did a pretty extensive study, and they found that the single largest talent problem cited from their research is the current and impending gap in the leadership pipeline. In fact, when we look at Burson's most current study, and they look at the talent shortages by job role, they see that by far line managers, the line managers that are ready to step up to the plate and be prepared to take over, really there's a shortage of those people, and they need to be trained and developed and coached and cultivated to be able to be ready in the future. So what do they need to be ready to do? What are the skills that you really need? And in this economy, in this day and age, we have identified 4 real skills that we think are important for managers to be able to do now. And the first one is the ability to inspire and engage staff. And, you know, what's interesting is I remember a moment ago when we asked you, you know, how many of you are facing the challenge to engage staff? And, you know, we don't have 100% of responses on most polling items. You said, 100% of you said, we are challenged right now to engage our staff. And if we look at the manager's role as the key ingredient in all of it, it's critical that they really know how to do that they know how to inspire them, they know how to help them contribute their best each day. That's just really essential. A next second skill that's really important is they know how to coach them to be able to really be more productive when they need some development, when they need some help. And most managers either don't know how to do this well, or they just don't do it at all. You know, they don't want to cause problems, they'd rather just not address it, and they just hope it's going to get better, and as a result, you know, nothing does. So they really need development and training to know how to do that. Another thing that we see is really important now, is because of the day and age that they're in, is that we're all in, is the need to focus on the key priorities. We have so much coming at us all the time, and we are constantly connected by BlackBerries and iPhones and cell phones and email, that there's so much coming at us, it's very easy to lose track of what are the most important things. And one of the key elements for most managers is developing their people. And they can definitely get lost in all of the everyday busyness and emails that gets pushed aside. And last but not least is the need to become effective change agents. Changes are only constant. And the ability for your organization to adapt to change, to be innovative, to be responsive is what will help you really survive and thrive in this economy. And those organizations that don't do that can be left behind. So it becomes really important, we feel, that these 4 skill areas are the most important in today's day and age because of what we see that's going on around us. Now, if we're going to really understand what managers need, we have to start first with employees, to them. And what do they really want at work, and what's really key to them? And this is a very interesting study that was done. It's actually been done 3 times by Lawrence Wendell and Bob Nelson and several other people. And they asked a group of managers, what did employees most want from their jobs? And then they went back and they asked the employees what they wanted. And the managers got very different responses. The managers thought it was one thing, and the employees thought it was something else. When they look at these things, the managers thought it was mostly financially related items. In other words, here's what the managers said. The number 1 thing they thought employees wanted was good wages, followed by number 2, job security, and number 3, promotion and growth. So in other words, they thought it the financial related thing. That's not to say that's not important, but when they went back to the employees, they got a very different answer. What the employees said is the number 1 most important thing they wanted was the ability to be appreciated. In other words, to feel valued and recognized for the work they did. The second one was to feel in on things, especially those that impact them. The third one kind of surprised me, sympathetic understanding of personal problems. It means basically to be heard and understood. Then came job security, then came good wages. So in other words, it looked like this. First, they wanted these top 3 things. Then the financial things came around. Now, what that means is that when we take a look at that, you know, there are people that quit and leave an organization, and then there's people that quit and stay. And you've probably seen both of those, and you know the difference. But whenever somebody quits, in other words, they check out, it's usually because one of these top three things happened first. They may tell you that they left because they got a better offer, but what happened that preceded it was that they probably had moments when they didn't feel appreciated, they didn't feel in on things that impacted them, and they didn't feel heard and understood. And so at that point they might say, well, maybe I will respond to that recruiter, or maybe I will actively start to look for another job. And you know, I'm curious if you can relate to this from your own experience. In fact, what I'd like to ask you to do is, if you want to raise your hand, if you can just relate to that. You'll see a little hand next to your name in the attendee list. Just go ahead and just raise your hand if you can relate to that personally. Either you've seen yourself where this has happened, or you've seen situations where, yeah, you know, this has definitely impacted you. And what we can see here is that when we begin to start to look at how many of you are really can relate to this, I can tell you that as I take a look at this, I can see that, you know, almost all of you are saying, yes, you can relate to that and can understand that. So here's what we begin to recognize then, is that this whole focus on understanding what's really critical and what's really important to people is to be able to understand that they need to feel valued, they need to feel recognized, they need to be able to know that what they do is important to other people. In other words, what we see is that recognizing and appreciating employees is one of the most powerful tools for enhancing engagement. It's one of the most powerful tools for being able to help people really feel validated. And the key person they want it from is their manager. It's that one-on-one relationship again. And this is so universal because it's just a fundamental human need that we all have. And that's why so many of you can relate to that. It's just human nature. So here's the next question for you. Based on your own experience in organizations, I'd be curious to see, do you think that managers in your organization could actually show appreciation more? And just send us your thoughts, either yes or no. Let's take a look. And this gives you a chance to benchmark your own responses against other people in the session and have an opportunity to really see what you think other people are saying as well. So please go ahead and make a selection, yes or no. Do you think managers in your organization could show more appreciation? Would that be important to them, to your organization? And let's take a look, and I'll show you the answers. And again, this doesn't surprise me too much. We had 100% of you say yes to that question. Now that, I think, should tell you a lot. If 100% of you say yes to that, then that means, the good news is, knowing that the manager's role is so critical, is that doesn't cost anything. In today's day and age, if you are looking for ways to help engage your staff and the managers do more of just this one thing, it can make a huge difference. All those top three things they wanted, feeling valued, feeling in on things, and feeling heard, you know, don't cost a thing. I don't know about you, but I'm sure a lot of organizations feel that they wish they had a bigger pool for salary increases. If you don't, those key things can go a long way. In fact, I'm curious about this as well. I'm going to ask you to raise your hand again on this one. If you go back to the attendee list again, here's another interesting question. Do you wish your own manager gave you more appreciation? Raise your hand if you do. Let's take a look. I'd be interested to see what you say. Do you wish your own manager gave you more appreciation and more recognition, and the people around you were key and did the same thing? And, you know, we see, you know, quite a few of you, most of you, raising your hands on that one as well. So one of the things we recognize is that a lot can come just from this. Well, let's go to the next topic now. And, you know, if the first skill that managers need is the ability to engage their staff. The second one they need is the ability to coach and develop their people, especially if there's a performance challenge and there's something that they need to begin to start to do. So one of the things that we begin to recognize is this is probably one of the biggest challenges most managers face. They don't want it to be conflictual. They don't want to cause problems. They don't want it to not be handled well. And so they either don't do it at all or they don't do it well. And what happens is it lowers morale for everyone around, because those people that are also impacted, other team members that are impacted by poor performance, suffer. So it becomes really a key skill, a really important skill that managers need. And to help managers be able to do that, we've seen that there are several communication skills they need to be really adept at. Now, in this model, you will notice that we put appreciation and affirmation as the foundation, because we truly believe that that is a very powerful tool for engaging people. But these other skills sit on top of that, and they become really important whenever someone is having a coaching discussion. The need to be specific about the issue at hand, about the performance issue, not the person. The need to ask open-ended questions, not just closed-ended questions, open-ended questions to get more information from the other person and to ask questions more than talk, and the need to really listen, to let them know that they hear you. And what happens is that we see that the need to ask questions comes in the process of helping to ask the employee for their ideas to solve the problem. So instead of telling them, which is fairly disengaging, it's important to ask them for their ideas so they take ownership and they feel more involved in the process. And then make sure you follow up with them so that they know this is really serious and you have the opportunity to help and develop them as you go. And last but not least, really make sure you're focusing on specific behavior, not just personality issues, which you really can't address, but specific behavior. So here's another question for you. From your own experience in your own organization, do you think that managers in your own organization address performance issues often enough? So please send us your thoughts, yes or no. Do they do this often enough, and could they do it better if not? But do they do it often enough? In other words, are you kind of seeing what we've just talked about, that a lot of managers just don't do this or they don't do it well? And when you look around in your own organization, are you seeing it's happening and that people have the ability to coach and develop and they do address those issues? So what are you noticing in your own organization? And one of the things we see when we look at your answers to this is it's not surprising. Pretty amazing. We had 100% of you say, no, they're not doing this enough. Well, what this does say to us is it really validates what we've just been talking about and why this skill is needed and why it's needed, because when you talk about improving performance, that again comes back to the manager and leader or manager or supervisor of that person, and why it's so critical. So again, it seems as if you're saying as well that this is really an important skill. So we've talked about the first two skills. The third skill that managers need is to focus on key priorities. And let's look at why this is such a challenge. And I think that one of the main reasons is it's just difficult to disconnect from our communication technology. The cell phone's ringing. You're getting a text message right now. The office phone may be ringing. You're getting email. It's all happening now. And because it's all happening now, it's making it all really urgent. It's happening now. It's urgent. And we are, I don't know about you, but I know it's for me, it's very easy to just be so swamped with all these things coming in that you can get distracted pretty easily. Now, I think this is unique to our time because of this technology that we have, and it's never been more important or more challenging to focus on your key priorities. And so it becomes then, if everything is urgent, it's really critical to separate what's really urgent from what's really important, and begin to really identify that it's the important things that are going to give you results, not necessarily the urgent ones, but it's the important ones. You don't want to just be busy all day. You want to be effective. And so, the key question to ask yourself is, are managers able to focus on key priorities that make an impact, or are they just being busy? Because if they're just being busy, they're not going to get you the results that you need. And it's challenging now. It is really challenging. It's especially challenging because of all of our technology. So they've got to be very disciplined to do these kinds of things. They've got to be able to identify the most important things that they need to be accomplishing each week. And we encourage them to limit that to 3 key priorities. What are their 3 most important things they need to do each week? And then they look at their weekly calendar and they schedule time in to accomplish those things. So by the end of the week, no matter how many crises, unexpected challenges, unexpected requests came through, they got their 3 most important things done. Now, if they make their list longer than 3, they're not prioritizing anymore. So it becomes really, really important. And I know that a lot of people will do a to-do list daily, but it's really important to prioritize that to-do list according to how important it is. So not just what do you want to do or what can you do easier or quicker, but how important is it? Because last but not least, we encourage everybody to start asking their question of how important is this activity to accomplishing our organization's key goals or my key goals as a manager. And is this the most important thing that I should be doing now? If managers don't do those most important things, they just can't be effective. And again, it's never been more challenging because of the technology that we have for all of us. So here's the next question, and let's be honest, I'm going to ask you this one from a personal perspective. Do you think you could prioritize your time better? What do you think, yes or no? Send us your thoughts over. Do you think you could prioritize your time better? Is there room for improvement? Do you feel like you do a pretty good job now, or do you think you could do a better job of prioritizing, being really pretty good at prioritizing? So send your thoughts over, select one of these, either yes or no, and here's what we see as the result. I am happy to see that 15% of you said no, so we've got a few of you at least who are doing a pretty good job of prioritizing your time. So that I'm really glad to see. But for 85% of us, this is a real challenge, which again is one of the reasons why we have it listed in one of the 4 key challenges we think managers need today. It's so critically important. So we've talked about then so far the first 3 skills, the need to engage people, the need for managers to engage people. The second one was the need for managers to really coach and develop their staff. The third one was the need for them to prioritize their responsibilities and time. The last one that we want to take a look at is the ability for them to manage change. The need really to be agents of change. And there's a real tendency to resist change. We've all seen it. That's also part of human nature because it's just, people resist it even if it makes their life simpler or it makes it better or it makes things faster. We're just resistant. We're not quite sure about it. And what happens is that once you understand the predictable phases of transition that everyone goes through, you can then begin to understand them and deal with them, and managers can lead based on where their staff are. It's also really important during times of change that if you want to keep people engaged in the process, managers have got to get buy-in by encouraging ownership wherever they can. So that means they want to ask for the suggestions from their staff about how might we implement this. Even when the change is non-negotiable, give them some ability to have input and ownership. And it's really, really important in keeping engagement levels high. And last but not least, the importance of communicating. Don't, keep things from them. Let them know. Even if you don't know the answer, let them know that you don't know the answer, that you're looking into it. Throughout the whole change process, communication is really critical. So let's talk about the phases of transition that we all go through as it relates to change. And one of the things we see that happens is that people first start in this focus where they're more internal and they're focusing on the past, and it's this whole emphasis of denial. So what you'll hear happening around you is that people will say, I can't believe this is happening again. Or I can't believe what management did now. I just can't believe it. And those are the kinds of things that you will hear. As people then move into this process of, okay, so now I'm actively resisting it. I don't like this. And either they'll just, one thing that they'll do is just continue doing it the old way to find out if they really do have to change, or they'll complain and get upset about it and be, very vocal about it. Some resist more internally, and some might be more expressive. But you'll see resistance, and know when you see it that it doesn't mean someone's bad or uncooperative. It's a natural response to the phases of change and transition that we all go through. When a leader can effectively move them past that into exploration, what you'll notice is that they'll start to try, but they'll fall back again. They'll start asking a lot of questions. How am I supposed to do this again? So this is supposed to be done first and then this, but they're making an effort. They're just not real sure about it until they finally get up to a phase of fully adopting the change and being committed to it, at least until the next change is again and they start the process all over. So once a manager understands that, then there are certain steps they can take in each of these phases to help people move forward into the next phase. Also, when we talk about why communication is so important, if a manager doesn't constantly communicate about what they know and share the information about what they know, then people are going to start guessing, and gossip will happen, and it gets really blown out of proportion. Because the definition of fear is false expectations appearing real. And that's what happens if they don't have the communication they need to understand really, what's going on, and their manager isn't being open and sharing with them. So basically, as we've talked about, the 4 skills that managers need now, again, the need to engage, the need to coach, the need to prioritize, and the need to manage and lead change. In other words, it brings us all to basically this fundamental challenge that you may be facing now. It's probably, how do we help our managers develop the skills they need to lead us through these uncertain times? And how can we do this in the most productive way and also the most cost-effective way? Because we've got to do both at the same time. We've got to make it better, and we've got to do it even more cost-effectively. And so with that thought, here's where the benefit of live virtual learning comes in. Now, I want to share some thoughts with you about that. Live virtual learning is really on the rise. A lot of organizations are focusing on it because they've restricted travel, right, as many of you said that you've experienced. And we are seeing, as a result of that, a really high increase in e-learning and virtual delivery. Now, I want to share this research study with you. Now, this is from the Learning Executives Confidence Index that the American Society of Training and Development publishes each quarter. This is the most recent quarterly statistics we have. Now, notice up here at the top, the dark blue means a substantial increase, and the green is a moderate increase. When we look at the use of e-learning, we see about 75% are saying there's a moderate increase or substantial increase. So 75% are saying there is a big increase of e-learning. And by e-learning, we're talking about live virtual learning and self-paced e-learning. Now also then look at this. Red is a moderate decrease or substantial decrease. Huge decrease in travel for training purposes. So it just makes sense now. And this is why this is growing so much, and so many people are starting to take a look at it. And if you haven't begun to start to look at live virtual learning or e-learning, this can help you benchmark where your organization is against, learning executives in, a lot of organizations according to this research. Now, I'm also going to give you a chance to benchmark yourself against other participants in the class. So let's just see what your organization is facing now. And if you could send your thoughts over, Are you finding, is your organization restricting travel for training purposes? Are you having an increase in e-learning and also an increase in live virtual learning? So send us your thoughts over on these and let us know what you see. Are you seeing an increase in self-paced e-learning, live virtual learning, or training purposes? And let's see what you're finding. And this gives you a chance to really recognize this for other people as well. And I think we might not have set this for you to choose more than one. If you're not able to choose more than one on this question, just select the one that you think you're seeing the biggest impact on right now. Okay, so let's take a look and I'll show you the results. And one of the things that we're seeing is, definitely 46% increase in self-paced e-learning, 31% of you are restricting travel for training, and 23% are seeing an increase in live virtual learning. Now, the good news is for the other 75% of you, or 77% of you, that are not seeing an increase in live virtual learning, you have a real opportunity now that you may not have considered, and this could really help you. Here's why live virtual learning is so incredibly important. One of the things that we see that happens is that when you develop it well, you can actually make it even better than face-to-face learning in terms of the quality of learning that your participants experience and leave with. Also, you can definitely make it stick because it's easy to reinforce, and you can build in a lot of virtual reinforcement tools. And last but not least, in this economy, it enables you to actually do these two things simultaneously. Do it in less time, more productively, and cost effectively. So there's a lot of benefits to live virtual learning. Well, here's how it can be helpful. When you design it as a process, in other words, you take what would be a one-day class, and you break it down into 90-minute segments, and you have a series of 3 to 4 of those segments. Then it enables you to assign action plans between sessions, and for people to go back and implement that between the first session and the second session. So they go back and apply what they learned. And what happens is your learning is now a process instead of an event. When we look at how people learn, they learn by a process. The worst thing you don't want them to do is go to a one-day class and come back and put their workbook on the shelf and forget about it. So when you can build in action plans and the ability for them to put into place, you can build in more accountability that they are actually really able to implement what you've been talking about, and their learning goes up. What we also see is with live virtual learning, this is very easy to customize. It's much easier to customize than an e-learning course that's self-paced. So, you can really target the specific issues that your organization is facing. You can put quotes from your senior leadership team in there, all without having any travel. And another thing is it's minimizing a whole chunk of time. I don't know about you, but we hear a lot of clients who say, I just can't take a day out of work. But taking 90 minutes makes it a lot easier for them. So it fits their needs as well. And what we suggest, again, is that you break it into a few very targeted things. So what happens is people in that 90-minute class want their learning to be very targeted. They don't want to have a lot of fluff. They want it to be really focused on what they need, and they want to be able to come in and leave with ideas they can implement right away that are really going to make a difference and help them. We usually do it no longer than 90 minutes. Some sessions are 60, but you always, always, always want to have action plans and assignments between every session, because that's what helps them really learn. And then you want to be able to focus on reinforcement. We put a lot of emphasis on this. I know that we are really leaders in this area with our clients. Not only do you want them to have an action plan that they're going to come back and share at the next class, but you want them to take that action plan back to their manager, their own respective manager, so that that manager can begin to support their learning in the process. And we, inform the managers about that before they come into the session so they know all about it. And then provide ample post-course follow-up reinforcement sessions. Now, if you are just doing face-to-face learning now and you haven't entered into the world of live virtual learning, I would really encourage you to begin to start by having live virtual reinforcement sessions after any of your classroom-based classes. We do them as 60-minute follow-up sessions, and during that time, people come back and they talk about their action plan. They talk about what they did, and we review their key concepts. And when you do this, it will really give you a bigger return on your learning dollar, because people are then going back and implementing it at a much higher rate. We also frequently have reinforcement tips newsletters that are tied to the content of that class, that are very unique to that program, that help keep the information fresh for them and add additional articles and additional reading. So here's the next question for you as we begin to start to think about it a little bit more. And from your own perspective of reinforcement, do you think your organization needs to provide more reinforcement for your learning programs? And please just let us know, yes or no. What do you think, and what do you find as it relates to this one? Do they need to put more emphasis on reinforcement? Are there ways that they could help learners keep that material fresh and help learners keep that material current and enable them in the process to be even more accountable? And let's take a look at what you said. And once again, it looks like we've got 100% of you who are saying, yes, we could reinforce more. So if that was you, which it looks like it probably was for everyone, I really encourage you to consider live virtual learning for reinforcement. If you do nothing else, that one tip can make a huge difference on even just the traditional face-to-face classroom sessions that you've got. So let's talk about how this would look. Let me give you some examples from what we've done, and we'll also talk about best practices for live virtual learning so you can really begin to see how it all comes together. Now, this is an example of a single session class. It's kind of funny because one of the topics that we see a greatest demand for in a live virtual class is time management. It's kind of funny, because people say, I don't have time to take a day for time management, but a day out of my day, but I really need this topic. So the structure, though, is one that we use in a lot of cases. It begins with a self-assessment profile, and again, we use a lot of profiles in what we do. People take this as pre-work, and in that assessment, they learn a lot about their own strengths and development needs, as you can see in these 12 different areas. So they get a report back, and they have a chance to read that before they come to class. Then we have a 90-minute live virtual class, and we talk about tips and techniques for how they can best prioritize their time, manage their time, and what are some real tangible nuts and bolts activities that are really going to make a difference. Then they create their action plan, and everybody, types in the text chat box what their plan is and what category of these 12 categories they're working on, and we know what that is so that they go back and then implement it. Now, 3 to 4 weeks later, we have our 60-minute reinforcement session. We talk about some of the key points, and we also give everyone an opportunity to really update us on how their action plan works. And what we hear from the participants is that this reinforcement session was critical in enabling them to really follow through on their plan, which you can just intuitively understand. So if you need to reinforce more, focus here, and it can make a huge difference. We do it with all of our classes. Now, also, this is a way that we have now put together those 4 skills that I talked about before that managers need into a live virtual management development training program. And it is designed, all these classes are virtual. Several of them have a self-assessment profile, like what you just saw. But it addresses those 4 basic skills. The need to manage people is the first one. And it begins with a self-assessment profile called the Everything Just Managers Profile. Now, this really addresses, and we begin here, it addresses for each participant, how do they motivate people, how do they develop people, and how can they improve as a manager. It's a really good foundational session to begin with. And then we begin to help them understand how do you manage performance, what are the communication skills they need, as we saw earlier. But we also have a 7-step process that shows them how do you really go through coaching and developing your staff. How would you do that? And then we move into the managing priorities, which has a time mastery profile. Again, it's pre-work. So this is just like the session I just showed you. We've just inserted as a longer process. And then managing change, which also has a leading change profile and talks about how to gain support for change initiatives. Now, the way that we reinforce these sessions is that everybody creates an action plan at the end of each session, and then they come back at the beginning of the next session, and we reinforce the previous session at the beginning of the next session, and we talk about that before we move into the content. So we build that into every class, but at the end of the last one, we schedule one reinforcement session 1 month later to review everything and how people are doing on their action plans, and we also go back 6 months after the program. In addition to that, we send reinforcement newsletters every 2 months for 1 year. So this program is a year-long process. It is not an event, and this is how we really begin to see that people make changes. They're held accountable, they begin to work through it, and there's lots of reinforcement tools available. Now, if this program that we just talked about is of interest to you, we are going to offer it as a public workshop. We frequently don't. Many times it's designed for in-house organizations, but we are offering it as a public workshop. You can take each of these sessions individually or as a series. The series is the most effective because there's the reinforcement element from the action plans at the beginning of each session, but a single course is also an option. And we make it very affordable so that you can even send individuals if you don't have an entire group. Now, if you'd like to bring it into your organization, then it can be even more cost effective, and we can customize it to your organization's needs. And we can also offer train the trainer programs. So if you want your own facilitators to become certified in how to do this, we can offer that as well. Now, we have also, just so you know, a variety of live virtual courses listed in our virtual course catalog. This is just a list of some of them, but if you would like to receive the catalog, you'll get a survey will pop up at the end of the webinar today, and you can select your request for that, and we can send it to you. Also, just wanted to let you know that we have created a full library of self-paced e-learning courses, too, for these areas of management, customer service, and sales training. And you can preview those on our website by just going to the e-learning link, and there's a place there where you can preview all of those. So in summary, I hope that you found this helpful. I hope I was able to give you some ideas about the key skills that managers really need to be effective today, and also how you can actually do both these things at the same time. How you can maximize learning even on a minimized budget, because live virtual learning can be a very effective resource for you. And just remember that, you know, the single most important determinant of individual performance is a person's relationship with his or her immediate manager. So the manager's role in your organization is fundamentally critical. Now, in a moment, you'll have an opportunity again when you log off. A survey will come up where you will be able to request more information. Also, we really would appreciate your feedback. If you would do that, we would appreciate it. But I'd like to open it up to questions now. I know that Kathy Doris has been standing by to monitor those questions and respond to some of them. But Kathy, could you let me know some of the questions that have come up, and just ask those, and we'll try to respond to those in the next 5 minutes.
Okay, here's one. How is live virtual learning different from a webinar?
That's a good question. What we have done here is a webinar. This is really like one person talking to many. We have many people in this session today. So we're not able to make it as interactive as we would in a live virtual class. In a live virtual class, everybody sees the chat box, and we use the chat box very, very liberally. So what would happen is I would ask the class a question, and everybody would respond in the chat box. So if we were in a face-to-face class, only one person could respond at a time. In the live virtual class, if you ask a question, everybody can respond at a time. And then what we do, because everybody in the class can see everyone else's answers in the chat box, I'll ask them to come off mute. So I might say, well, Barbara, that's a good question. That's a good comment. Could you tell us what you mean more about that? Or Shelley, that was very interesting. Could you explain that further? And people are talking to each other. You can hear it. It's very, very interactive. A lot of the ones I will tell you, the common comment that we hear most frequently is that people will say they were really amazed at how interactive our live virtual classes are. We're leaders in it. We've been doing it a long time, so it's really essential to do that. Did you have many more questions, Kathy? Anything else?
I have a couple more. Here's one.
Okay.
We haven't done much virtual training. How do you get people to really participate?
Okay. So I guess the concern might be, okay, so some people might want to just sit at their computer and not participate, or they might get distracted. And I think what happens is you have to design your course so that you keep things moving pretty quickly. And you let people know up front that you're expecting everybody to participate. That's one thing that can really help if you set the expectations there. And then you call on people, kind of as I talked about, and let them put their answers in chat, and then call on them so that you make it more interactive. And if you have to design it a little bit differently, but I think if you do that, you can really make it interactive and participative. So I hope that answers that question and that helps. Kathy, I'll send it back to you. What other
any ideas about how to get senior management to support this kind of thing?
Yeah, good one. One thing that, just know that people are resistant to change sometimes. However, and that will happen with senior managers as well as any of us. However, if you can show them the cost benefit, it will usually make sense. If you can, feel free. Everybody will get a copy of this webinar. There's some research here. You're more than welcome to share it with them. And if you find that you can show them the benefit of reduction in travel and how important it is to really get people up to speed, especially your managers, and how your managers make such an impact on profitability, when you can present it that way to senior management and let them know that it can be done even more effectively and can really make a difference, you should find that you'll get a lot more support of it. You just may need to enter into it according to what's important to them and what they're looking for. But from my perspective, it just makes sense these days, and you can do it very well. Kathy, let's take maybe a couple more before we need to.
Okay. What's the best platform to use?
Oh, okay. Well, there's a lot of platforms out there. We're using GoToWebinar on this one. I know there are a lot of good ones out there. You've probably seen a lot of them. I think there's no one that's, to answer your question, I don't think there's one that's any better or worse. You probably just want to look at if it has the capabilities for your organization. And I would encourage you to get your IT department involved to kind of see if you might have any challenges with it. There are the one feature I personally would really recommend, though, for a class is to just make sure you have access to a chat box. Sometimes when we've used a client's platform and they haven't had the ability for us to see the chat box and for everybody in the class to see the chat box, it's really made it harder to participate. So that would be my only recommendation. But I don't think there's any. I don't know if there's any one platform that's any better or worse. You just have to look at it for your needs. And let's take one more, Kathy, maybe if you have one more.
Okay. Can we train our own trainers to do this?
Yeah, you can train your own trainers. You need to have a different skill level. The skill level to be a virtual trainer is a little different than a platform trainer. They can't see you, so you can't use, they don't see your animation. So you've got to have good voice inflection, and you've also got to make sure that you've designed it so that you've built it for a lot of interaction. But we can help with that, and we can coach your trainers on developing the skills they need to be good virtual trainers. So yes, we can do that. So it looks like we're just now on the hour, and I would like to say thank you to all of you. It's really been a pleasure. You'll see my contact information. If you have any questions for me, don't hesitate to reach out. And again, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us on the survey that's going to pop up as soon as we end the session. We really would appreciate your feedback, and that can also be a way for you to request more information from us if you would like it. So I hope this was helpful, and I wish you all the best. Take care, everyone, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.